Good morning. So the topic for today is Lechem Mishneh, the mitzvah to have 2 loaves of bread at the meal on the Shabbos, and we'll see the Yom Tov meals. I anticipate that this will be a 2-part class, and next Sunday I'll be out of town. So if it goes the way I anticipate, we'll start today and continue in 2 weeks from today to finish it off. Okay. The pasuk says in the Parshas B'Shalach, this is in Exodus chapter 16, pasuk 22. It came to pass on the 6th day that they gathered a double portion of bread. 2 omers for each one. Now, omer is it's a measure, it's a quantity, and every day the Torah says in the previous pasuk that every day they had 1 omer per individual, and on Friday there was a double portion of 2 omers for each individual. And they came to all the princes of the community, they came to tell Moshe about this. So based on this pasuk, the Gemara says, Amar Reb Abba. Reb Abba says, B'Shabbos chayav adam niftzeh al shtei kikaris, that on Shabbos a person is obligated to break bread in his meal on 2 loaves of bread. As it is written, Lokto Lechem Mishneh, they took double the bread. Okay. Now it's interesting, this expression break bread in Hebrew, the word is liftzoya, which literally means to break. Right? Well, that's the word we use. Now we're going to see later a discussion about if you actually have to break both of the breads or only break or cut one of the breads. In English, the expression break bread, I think, is usually used specifically when you're having a meal with friends. So then it's like this expression, you're breaking bread together. So I don't know if it is the literal translation, but obviously, the mitzvah of Lechem Mishneh applies even if you're just eating by yourself. It's the mitzvah to break bread. Now, the simple reading of this Gemara seems to suggest that this is a biblical mitzvah. We have, usually when the Gemara says, you have to do such and such, as the pasuk says such and such, that indicates that it is a biblical mitzvah. And indeed, the Taz, very famously actually, it's a famous Taz, how do you zoom in on without a mouse? I don't know. All right. The Taz is actually in the laws of Hanukkah. In the laws of Hanukkah, there's a discussion of what to do if somebody has very limited resources, and he can only afford either, it's going to be Shabbos on Hanukkah, and he can afford either to buy oil or a candle for his menorah, or to buy wine for Kiddush. Right, so that's a discussion that's brought in the poskim, and the Gemara says, and the Rambam says, etc., that the mitzvah of the menorah comes first because of Presumei Nisa. The idea of publicizing and celebrating the miracle of Hanukkah overrides the importance of making kiddush over wine. So in that discussion, the Taz says that the whole discussion is only if the choice is between wine and menorah. But if the choice is between bread and menorah, if you could either buy bread for your Shabbos meal or light the menorah, then the bread takes precedence. Why? Because, says the Taz, Hapas, the Lechem Mishneh, the bread of Lechem Mishneh, who koydem the ayin, precedes the wine. In other words, overrides wine, and certainly would override, according to the Taz, it would also override the menorah. The Lechem Mishneh l'kula al deraisa, because everyone agrees that Lechem Mishneh, having 2 loaves of bread at the Shabbos meal, is a biblical mitzvah. Could the Amar Reb Abba, as the Gemara says, the Chsiv Lechem Mishneh, right? So the pasuk says Lechem Mishneh. Reb Abba derives from this the mitzvah of Lechem Mishneh. So it must be that it's a biblical mitzvah. If somebody has limited resources, that would override the 2. Now, okay. So what is the other approach? Now, commonly the accepted opinion is that it's not deraisa. Why is it not deraisa? So let's first see the sources. First of all, you have the Magen Avraham. The Magen Avraham says he's talking here about the law of when you're allowed to take out Muslim 3 of Shalish Sudas, that if a person put bread in the oven on Shabbos, so then he's allowed to take them out. If you put it in inadvertently on Shabbos, I forget all the scenarios over there, and it's also not talking about the types of oven that we have nowadays. But the point is that there's a special dispensation that he's allowed to take out the bread that he needs for the meal on Shabbos. So the Magen Avraham says that that's only if you don't have any bread at all, because you don't have, or if you don't have any food at all, because you're not allowed to fast on Shabbos. But if you have food, you just don't have Lechem Mishneh, then you would not be allowed to take out the bread from the oven. And he says the reason, even though even though you need whole loaves for Lechem Mishneh, nevertheless, Lechem Mishneh to have Lechem Mishneh is not such an obligation, right? So clearly, if Lechem Mishneh were a biblical mitzvah, the Magen Avraham will not say that it's not a chayva kol kach, it's not such an obligation. So the pshat is that there's something called an asmachta. An asmachta literally means something that leans, something that's supported by a pasuk. And basically, there is the concept of a rabbinic mitzvah, which is not biblical, but we associate it with a pasuk, which that's a asmachta. It's being supported or leaning on a pasuk. Now, what exactly the point of this is a big discussion. Some say the point of the pasuk is just so that we should give us a clue to remember it, that if the Chazal associate a certain specific rabbinic mitzvah with the certain words of a pasuk, then when we read those words of the pasuk, it will remind us of the rabbinic mitzvah. There's other approaches to it also, but the concept of an asmachta is something which is throughout Shas. It comes up many times. That's a well-accepted concept. So basically, we have here a machlokes between the Taz and the Magen Avraham. Is this Gemara to be understood literally, that there is a biblical mitzvah derived from this pasuk to have 2 loaves in the meal on Shabbos, or is this merely an asmachta? The Aruch HaShulchan adds, he explains that the reason why the Taz understands that it's an actual full-fledged source from this pasuk that renders it a biblical mitzvah is because really the words double the bread is extra, because it could have just said on the 6th day they collected 2 omer for each one. Why do we need those extra words, double the bread? I know that 2 omer is going to be double. I've already been told that every day there's 1 omer, today there's 2 omer, so I can do the math. I know that it's double. So the extra words, once it's extra words, so therefore the Taz understands that it's actually a biblical mitzvah. But that's not the opinion of the Magen Avraham. And in practice, the Alter Rebbe also paskins that it's that it's not a biblical mitzvah. And I'll show you here from the Alter Rebbe. This is from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, chapter 274, Sif base, number 2, and we'll read it in English. Every person, male or female, is obligated to break bread on 2 whole loaves. There is an allusion to this from the pasuk. The word in Hebrew is a smach lozeh, right? Like a smachta. It's an allusion. It's found support in the pasuk, but it's not a biblical mitzvah. So there could be numerous ramifications to whether or not it's biblical or rabbinic. One difference would be, well, what if you're not sure if you did it? What if you don't remember? If you had, you were sitting at a meal and you were going to take. Everybody has you're at a Sheva Brachas, everybody has their own one little loaf in front of them, and it's designed that you take the one from the guy next to you to make Lechem Mishneh and give it back, and you don't remember if you did it, right? So if you don't remember if you did a mitzvah, if it's rabbinic, then you don't go and do it again usually. But if it's biblical, then you do. So that could be one possible practical ramification. There could be others. So there is this machlokes. In practice, we accept that it is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Now, this mitzvah applies also on Yom Tov. Now, even though the reason for Lechem Mishneh, why did the man fall double on Friday? Why?
You can't move from.
Right, you can't carry, and you can't transfer something from public to private property on Shabbos. So it would seem superfluous for it to happen on Yom Tov. Nevertheless, the Poskim will say, the Rambam says, the Poskim will say that the mitzvah does apply in Yom Tov, and that also in the desert, Lechem Mishneh, they did get a double portion on the eve of Yom, the day before Yom Tov. Now, I'm not sure why that would be the case. I don't know why, but the source for this in the Gemara is interesting, because on Pesach, we have a conflict. On the one hand, we have a mitzvah of Lechem Mishneh. You have to have 2 loaves. On the other hand, you have a mitzvah to break the matzah, right? So what's our workaround, right? You break the matzah, it's not going to be whole anymore. So what's our work? There's different customs actually. But the prevailing custom, based on one understanding of the Gemara and Brachas, is that the workaround is that's why we have 3 matzahs, so that we have when we make the bracha, when we say the bracha, well, that's what we do. When we say the bracha hamaitzi at the Seder night, we hold the whole pack of matzahs, so that you're holding 2 whole matzahs, and then you drop the bottom matzah and you say the bracha al achilas matzah just on the top whole one and in the middle broken one. Right? Why do we do that why do we need 3 matzahs? Because we want to be able to have 2 whole ones and we want to have 1 broken one. Right? So from the fact that the Gemara has this whole discussion, it's implicit that the Gemara is saying that the mitzvah of Lechem Mishneh implies on Yom Tov as well. Right? The Gemara doesn't say this only applies to when the Seder night falls on Shabbos. This is every Seder night. This is an issue that the Gemara addresses in Brachas. So it's implicit from that Gemara that the mitzvah applies also on Yom Tov. There is actually a beautiful sikha from the Rabbi, and look at the sikhas discussing exactly what the nature of the mitzvah of Lechem Mishneh is, and whether or not the nature of the mitzvah is different on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Perhaps we'll have time to visit that in a little bit in depth next time. Yeah, okay. Now, okay, so you noticed over here, says the words of the Alter Rebbe here, every person, male and female, is obligated to break bread in 2 whole loaves. Right? Now, why are women obligated in Lechem Mishneh? There is a principle that time-bound positive mitzvah, women are exempt from. Women don't have to shake lulav, they don't have to sit in the sukkah, right? So, I mean, obviously there's exceptions to the rule, but that's the rule. We've discussed this rule many times. So why should women be obligated to have to do Lechem Mishneh? Any thoughts?
The homework record of a single person.
Oh, very good. 1 second. So what Bob is saying is actually Rabbeinu Tam. That's what Rabbeinu Tam says. Rabbeinu Tam says that as a principle in the Gemara, that when women, that time-bound positive mitzvahs that commemorate a miracle, if that miracle pertained to women, then women are also obligated to do that mitzvah. So, for example, come on, Bob, keep on going. Megillah, you say? Anyone else? What's another time-bound positive mitzvah that women do because they were also saved by the miracle? Okay, possibly. We'll get to that. Hanukkah, right? Lighting menorah. Right? Women, they share with the husband, but women, if a woman's living alone, then some women light there's different customs, but certainly if women are living if they don't have a husband, then they have to light the menorah. And Ari said the Megillah. I'm going to get to Pesach in a minute. It's a very important point. It's actually relevant to what we're discussing. So why do women have to hear the Megillah and light the menorah? The answer is because even though it's time-bound positive mitzvah, so they also, so therefore they have to do that mitzvah. There's actually 2 pshatim and tosos whether it's if you have to say that if they were also saved by the mitzvah, or is it because they brought about the redemption by Hanukkah? The miracle was brought about through the heroic actions of Yehudis. By Purim, by Megillas Esther, it was through Esther Hamalka. Now, the third time where the Gemara uses this logic of Af Heinoi Ba'isai Nes, that they were also saved by the miracle, is for the 4 cups of wine on the Seder night. And there also the 2 interpretations follow, either because they were also saved from Egypt, or because they brought about the redemption in accordance with the Gemara that the redemption came b'schus Lashem Tzedkanis in the merit of the righteous women. Now, so the question is, now what about matzah on the Seder night? So matzah on the Seder, so Tosfos says that the reason why women have to eat matzah on the Seder night is because there's a iskash chometz lamatzah, yeah, that basically anybody, there's a limit from the pasuk, there's a derivative from the pasuk that we derive from the pasuk that anybody who's bound by the prohibition against eating chametz is also bound by the obligation to eat matzah. So the time-bound exemption is only for positive for mitzvahs, not for averos, right? Women are bound by time-bound negative prohibitions, right? You're not allowed to eat on Yom Kippur. That's for women also, even though it's time-bound, right? So women are obligated to abstain from chametz. They are prohibited, let's say it that way. Yeah, they are prohibited from having chametz on Pesach. So therefore, they are also obligated to have matzah. Right, so that's why they have to have matzah. So Tosfos explains that this logic of afhein hoiba ishanes only applies to mitzvahs d'Rabbanan, only applies to rabbinic commandments, like listening to the Megillah, like lighting the menorah, like having 4 cups of wine. Those are all rabbinic commandments. But when it comes to biblical commandments, the logic of afhein hoiba ishanes doesn't play a role, and that's why with matzah we don't say they have to eat matzah because they were also saved by the miracle. We say with matzah we have to have this other logic that because they're bound by the prohibition of chametz, they're also bound by the obligation of matzah. Now, explain why they don't have the fear of sukkah. I think Tosfos probably says it about. I think Tosfos says it about sukkah. Tosfos says that why don't we? I believe that's. Thank you for reminding me. I think that the Tosfos says it about sukkah. Why don't we say that women are obligated to have sukkah? They were surely also protected by the anane, by the clouds of glory in the desert. The answer is because we don't say afhein hoiba ishanes by a biblical mitzvah. Now, over here, it's not a Tosfos, but it's Rabbi Tam. Now, Rabbi Tam is a grandson of Rashi, and he is one of the most prominent and famous Baalei HaTosfos, right? Tosfos is a collection of writings from many Talmudic sages, Rishonim, medieval sages. I'm not the best in the history, but I think the vast majority lived in France. Certainly, Rashi and Rabbi Tam did. And Rabbi Tam is quoted, it's not in a Tosfos, but he's quoted, look over here, that women have to also have Lechem Mishneh because they were also by the Ness of the Mon. Now, if you say, like we said before, the Magen Avraham and the Alter Rebbe Paskin, that the mitzvah of Lechem Mishneh is rabbinic, and the association with the pasuk is only an asmachta that we find support in the pasuk, but essentially it's still a rabbinic mitzvah. So then it would make sense what Rabbi Tam is saying, that afhein hoiba ishanes, that therefore the women also have to do this mitzvah. But I'm pointing out, that if you accept the approach of the Taz and Aruch HaShulchan, that it's actually a full-fledged biblical mitzvah to have Lechem Mishneh, so then this would be a little bit problematic. How could Rabbi Tam say that afhein hoiba ishanes would be a reason to obligate women in Lechem Mishneh? I did not have a chance to look up the Tosfos. I have to see over there if there's more than one approach in Tosfos.
Where in I came late. So where in the Torah does it say?
Look to Lechem Mishneh. The Gemara says here. We showed the Gemara. Gemara Shabbos Amar Baba b'Shabbos Chayv Adam Muftzeh Shtei Tikoros Tichsiv Lechem Mishneh. And the Taz and the Chashulchan learn that it's a deraisa, and the Magen Avraham and the Alter Rebbe Paskin.
Where's them? I just don't know where them.
Here. V'hi b'yom Shishi Loch to Lechem Mishneh Shnei Ha'im Elechad.
Based on what happened, the story of the Omer.
Yeah.
I think I have an approach.
The Chashulchan says that the words Lechem Mishneh are superfluous because it could have just said Loch to Shnei Ha'im, and therefore the teaches us thing. Anyway, the Ram continues, however. So where we're at so far, the Taz would have to hold that women are exempt from Lechem Mishneh. One second. However, the Ram continues, and he says another reason why women should be obligated in Lechem Mishneh. And he says that just like we said before, that with chametz and matzah, anybody who's prohibited from partaking of chametz is thereby also obligated to partake in matzah. So we have a similar thing with Shabbos. Shabbos has zocher v'shomer. There's the positive of remember the Shabbos, and there's the negative not to desecrate Shabbos. Yeah, shomer. We'll get into the logistics right now, but the mechanism. But right. So here also we say that anybody who is bound by the negative prohibition not to desecrate the Shabbos, which obviously includes women also, because women are bound by time-bound negative commandments. So therefore, they're also bound by the top positive mitzvahs of Shabbos, right? And this is actually the way the Alter Rebbe says it. If you look in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch later on, in chapter 291, Siv Ches, it says, women are obligated to partake in the third meal as men are, and similarly to break bread on 2 whole loaves every Shabbos meal. For men and women are equally obligated with regard to every aspect of observance of Shabbos.
Shamar and Zachar are
Zachar is an asay, and Shamar is a lois asay. Yeah,
this would fit more into the category of
Zachar. Yeah, yeah. Even if it's the Rabbanan, it's still in the.
Well, if it's the Rabbanan, you have a different reason why they have the Bichai, right?
The Rabbanan is saying you don't need that reason. There's a more basic reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Marshall, if you want to take the pshat of the I think it's the Rashba, the Afhenoi Beis Hanes means that they brought about the miracle, so that wouldn't apply to Lechem Mishnah. So that's why this reason is better anyway, right? If you say that women are only bound by mitzvahs which they brought about the miracle, then it wouldn't work for Lechem Mishnah. Right. Yeah. Okay.
But I would say, even according to the opinion that it is the Araisa, I think they, to a certain extent, they would acknowledge that where we're learning it from is a mitzvah that was given before Matan Torah. So that might be different. Right? That was a mitzvah that when you went out collecting.
Yeah, so that's the Shreirkeit. The Lechem Mishnah is telling you a story. But the Aruch HaShulchan says no, that because the words are extra, so it's a full-fledged limud.
Right, it could be a full-fledged limud, but it was the mitzvah is connected to something that.
Okay.
I mean, it would more go into the category, not necessarily of a smachta, but of a mitzvah that we still do. Once Matan Torah was instituted, but it was a mitzvah that's from the time before the Torah was given. Not for some. I mean, I guess we'd have to give an explanation to why Derabanan and Deraisa doesn't make a difference at all. I don't understand why. Why by a Derabanan, Afen Ayudo Sones is compelling and a reason to.
Well, I don't want to get too sidetracked, and I haven't looked this up, but I think by Deraisa there's principles of mitzvah stations mangram and oshim pturis by Chazal. So hey mamru, they could institute it, and when they have the logic of Afinei Beis Hanes, so they say, okay, we're going to extend it to women also. But to take that logic,
why don't we just follow the way the Torah does it? No.
Okay.
I mean, it's hard, right?
Yeah.
Hard to understand why.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
If there's a good reason not that they don't, so they shouldn't be keeping it. So then, why not?
All right. Okay. Now, what about this interesting one? Okay, let's first go on to the Gemara. The Gemara says, we already saw the beginning of the Gemara. Let's see the continuation of the Gemara. Hold on. Here we go. So we already saw the Gemara that says before that you have to have two loaves, Lechem Mishneh. The Gemara continues. I saw that Rav Kana, would hold 2 loaves of bread, but he only broke 1 loaf of bread. Amar Lok Tuksid, because if you look at the pasuk, it says they collected Lechem Mishneh. It doesn't say they ate Lechem Mishneh. Right? They didn't eat the next one was for Friday, one was for Shabbos. Yeah, it says they collected Lechem Mishneh. So there's a mitzvah to collect, i.e., to hold Lechem Mishneh. There's no mitzvah to eat both of them.
They had to have 2. They had 2 for Friday night. But where's the second one?
Right. So it doesn't match up. Right? No. It doesn't, you're right. It doesn't. That's what I'm saying. The story doesn't match up with what we're doing with the pasuk. The story says they had 1 omer to use for Friday, which was for the meal of Friday morning and the meal of Friday night, which is also Shabbos. And the second omer was for the meal of Shabbos morning and the meal of Shabbos night, which, by the way, that's why the importance of Melava Malka is that the meal of Matzah Shabbos is still associated with the Lechem Mishneh. With the double portion of one that they got on Friday. In other words, we say in Kiddush, yeah, where the pasuk says, "Vayivarech vayikadosh." Hashem blessed the 7th day and He sanctified the 7th day. So Rashi says, "Berche b'man v'kiddush b'man." That the double portion of man is the extra blessing of Shabbos. The double portion of man doesn't finish until after Malav Malka, because part of the half of that omer was eaten on the night meal of Shabbos, which is Matzah Shabbos.
Wait, you said they got 4 on Friday?
No, 2, but each one is for 2. Each one omer is for 2. Each meal is half an omer. Right? They got 1 omer, and each meal is half an omer. Nowadays we have 3 meals a day, but Yes, the standard is 2 meals a day, right? Nowadays we have 3 meals. The standard is 2 meals a day.
So when they had an Omer,
The Sudas Hayom and Sudas Halayla.
Okay, so one was for that night. That night. Too.
So when they had it, it wasn't about how many loaves of bread they had. They had half an omer to eat for the day meal and half an eighth for the Friday night meal, right? But we're sort of taking these words a little bit out of context and using it for this limud, and we're saying Lechem Mishneh means you have to have 2 loaves of bread on Shabbos. Lakta Lechem Mishneh means that you have to hold 2 loaves of bread on Shabbos. It doesn't mean you actually have to think. Now, then the Gemara continues, and here there's 2 ways how to read this. The next line. Rabbi Zayda would break, the same word, batzah, break the bread, akula sheirusei, the whole meal. Rav Sanusa, that it appears gluttonous to be breaking the whole meal. We'll see in a minute what that means. Amalei, no. If you would break the whole meal every day, then that would appear gluttonous. But if you don't do it every day and you only do it on Shabbos, so then it's clear that you're doing it for the mitzvah and not because you're gluttonous. So what does it mean to break the whole meal? So Rashi says, what Rabbi Zayda would do was that he would cut, when he cut the bread for the Shabbos meal, he would cut a big piece of bread, a very big piece, and that piece should suffice for the whole meal. Right? And that the Gemara says, what do you mean? It looks like you're gluttonous. You're cutting yourself such a huge piece of bread. And I said, no, every day you cut yourself a small piece. And the Shabbos, you cut a big piece, so it's evident that it's the covered Shabbos. That's the way Rashi learns the Gemara. And indeed, we pass it that way. That you're supposed to, when you cut yourself a piece of challah on Shabbos, you're supposed to cut yourself a piece that's big enough for the whole meal. Now, that becomes a little bit difficult to implement when you're sharing your challah with all the people around the table. And we're going to get to that later about what the correct way to do that is. But that's what Rashi says, and that's brought also la halacha. Let me just see quickly.
You're supposed to cut or break?
No, cut. Cut is fine. That's just that's just an expression. But again, I spoke before about the English expression break bread. That's brought clearly in Shulchan Aruch that you're supposed to do this. You're supposed to cut a piece of bread that's big enough for the whole meal. In practice, I haven't really seen it be done, and I think the reason it's not done is because we slice the bread, we share it with everybody. It's not really possible. However, there's a very different reading of the Gemara. The way Rashi's explained the Gemara here is we have 2 unrelated statements. One statement is Rav Ashi says that I saw Rav Kana that he would hold both breads and only cut one of them because you only have to eat both of them. And Rabbi Zayda would cut a piece of bread that was big enough for the whole meal. The Rashba says that no, this is one continuous of a discussion. Rav Kana would say that he would hold 2 but only break one of them. Says Rabbi Zayda, no. Says Rabbi Zayda, he would cut, not that he would cut a big slice for the whole meal, he would cut all the bread. He would cut both of the breads. Right? So according to this interpretation, we have 2 opinions. You have to hold 2 loaves of bread for Lechem Mishneh, and then do you cut one of them or do you cut both of them? Right? And indeed, this Rashba is brought by some of the poskim, and the Mishnah Berurah brings it, that the Marshal and the Shalah have the custom to cut both of them as the explanation of the Rashba in the Gemara. And the Chen Hiskim HaGra, the Vilna Gaon, also says that. Basically, and to cut both of them. So there is such an opinion, but nevertheless, the custom is like the Shulchan Aruch only cut one of them. But for those who follow the Alter Rebbe, for us, the Alter Rebbe says explicitly that you only have to cut one of them. It is not necessary to cut, this is in the beginning of Reish Ayin Dalet. It is not necessary to cut open both loaves. Instead, one should hold both of them in his hand and slice open one of them. For the term Lechem Mishneh was mentioned only with regard to collecting, i.e. holding one's hand. One may release the other loaf from his hand when slicing, holding the 2 loaves while reciting the blessing suffices. Okay? So far, so good? All right.
4 loaves of bread.
Yeah, one of those are you need 4. See, for us, it's for one. Well, okay, not really going in any order over here, but there's another question. The other question is, how many meals? So you have Lechem Mishneh for the Friday night meal, for the Shabbos day meal. Do you need to have two questions? First of all, do you need to have Lechem Mishneh for Shalosh Shudas? What?
I've always thought you don't.
Okay. And furthermore, what if you happen to have a fourth meal on Shabbos? Do you have to have Lechem Mishneh by the fourth meal? So, not surprisingly, there's two opinions. So you have to have Lechem Mishneh. So it's clear. So I don't get wrong. Those are the foolish in the Pasuk that you have to have Lechem Mishneh for Shalosh Shudas also.
Most people doing that.
I see people doing that, absolutely.
Most people don't.
I disagree. From what when I go to, okay, so Chabad custom is Mechlal that we don't wash for Shalosh Shudas, right? But when I've been around in shuls where they have Shalosh Shudas,
people go up and
they take the one next to them and say Lechem Mishneh, absolutely. Yeah, you agree?
Yeah,
okay.
I do that too.
Right, so that's Lechem Mishneh. That's a it says beferish. That could be. You don't need to have your own two loaves. You could have one loaf and take a loaf from somebody else and combine it. Right? If you hold like the Rashba that you have to cut both loaves, then it wouldn't help to take from the guy next to you because you have to cut both of them. But we paskin that you only have to cut one loaf, so you could just hold another one from the guy next to you, right? So that's beferish. Now,
what does he do?
Well, then you're going to need to have one spare loaf. If you have 10 people, you have 11 loaves. It's enough for everybody to do Lechem Mishneh.
Yeah? And then pass both of them to you, and you can do it, and you both get your own.
Well, one could be Yotze from each other. We're going to get to that. We'll get to the idea of how you just if everybody makes their own Lechem Mishneh, or only one per. We're going to get to that, right? So that's the mafurish that you have to have Lechem Mishneh for Shalosh Shudas. But then there's another machlekes. The other machlekes is what if you have more than 3 meals? Do you have to have Lechem Mishneh? Now, I didn't bring that on the sources. The if I recall correctly, certainly the Alter Rebbe paskins. Look over here. First of all, this is in Siman Reish Sadik Aleph. The lashon is the Chein Tzvei basically because b'chol suda, that you have to have 2 whole loaves for every Shabbos meal. Certainly, lechatchila we paskin like the opinion that you have to have Lechem Mishneh for every meal, even more than 3 sudas. So even if for whatever reason it's a long Shabbos and you daven in the Vasikin and you come Shabbos afternoon, you're hungry and you have a 4th meal. Again, I don't know if it's a lechatchila or toiv li zohir, or I don't remember the exact terminology used, but certainly the correct thing to do, if possible, is to have Lechem Mishneh at any meal. So B'meila, So as far as for Lubavitch, as far as we're concerned, even though we're not makbid to wash for Shalosh Shudas, we rely on those opinions that for the 3rd meal it's enough to just have something to eat. You don't need to have actual bread. But if you choose to wash for Shalosh Shudas, then you should do Lechem Mishneh. Yeah, because it's no worse than having a 4th meal, which you're supposed to have Lechem Mishneh for. Anyway, you following my logic?
Yeah.
I'm saying even if you hold that you don't need to wash for Shalosh Shudas, so if you don't need to wash, you certainly don't need to have Lechem Mishneh. But if you are washing, then you do need to have Lechem Mishneh because it's no worse than having a 4th and a 5th meal that you have to have Lechem Mishneh for, ideally.
Right. I think a lot of people assume that the mitzvah of whether it's Derban or Deraisa of taking 2 loaves is in commemoration of the fact that on Friday we got 2. But that's true. But it's not like we got 2 for Friday night and then Shabbos day, right? Really, we got 2. We got 2 that covered both Friday night and Shabbos day, and then even that night after. And
Friday morning. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't really match up neatly in that way.
Yeah, so what we're doing is if we're at every meal on Shabbos, we're commemorating the fact that we
Exactly. Okay. Now, what about any questions or everything clear so far?
Take 2 for everything.
All right. Now, here's a good question. What about Mazonos? Now, there's 2 questions on Mazonos. One question is, one question is if we have Mazonos bread, right? So if you have, let's say, challah, it's more common in New York, you have bread that was made with juice, and that's for argument's sake that it was made with juice that's not from concentrate. So it's proper quote unquote mezainis bread. Nevertheless, if you're making a meal over it, so then you make hamaitzi, and that's considered that's okay for Lechem Mishneh. Yeah, but if you're making hamaitzi on a regular hamaitzi bread, then you should not use your second loaf, ideally of a mezainis loaf. That's A. What's a more common question is, what if you're not washing it? You're having kiddush and shul, and you're having mezainis. You're gonna have bread at home. You're having kiddush and shul. You're gonna take a cookie, a piece of cake, a cracker for your mezainis, kiddush makom suda. So do you have to take two whole cookies or two whole crackers to make Lechem Mishneh? Because you have to have Lechem Mishneh by every meal. What do you think? You think no? No, it's a separate meal when you get home. I'm pretty sure that here, let's see if he brings it here. Yeah, so the Mashal in the Shmu Shabbos Kilchasa, he says lachatchila you should do so, but lachatchila you should take two cookies and now you should. I should preface. You should take. Ideally, you should always make a bracha on something whole. So if you have, let's say, if you're having a piece of cake and a cookie, better say the mezainis on the cookie because the cookie is something whole, whereas the cake is usually just a slice of cake, right? But so he says that you're supposed to ideally make Lechem Mishneh on the cookies. L'maisa, the Alter Rebbe says otherwise. The Alter Rebbe says.
Pick up at the kiddush and take two cookies and put them together.
Yeah, if you put one back, you can.
No, you have to eat them.
So you're very machmir. Not only do you make Lechem Mishneh on cookies, you're machmir to eat both of the loaves.
Yeah.
How do you plan on cooking? Which one did you want, or one that you just eat?
There isn't cooking in the world. It isn't worth eating.
I hold more like this.
You are.
We get a much shot.
Right. There we go. Okay, so this is from the Alter Rebbe. Oh, no, I lost it. So this is from the Alter Rebbe in Simukuf Samaches. In the laws, it's not in the laws of Shabbos, it's in the laws of brachas. And there he talks about different types of dough. You need it this way, that way. Is mezainis hamaitzi, all the name of mezainis and hamaitzi breads and cook stuff. And then there he says that if a dough is a different rule applies when dough is kneaded with water, but a small amount of honey and spices is mixed into it. That even though the flavor of the honey and the spices is evident in the dough, nevertheless the blessing mezainis should not be recited over it. Instead, what's recited the blessing hamaitzi and benching, since the majority of the liquid used is water. Similar law applies if a small amount of milk, butter, oil, fat, and other liquids or fruit juice is mixed into the dough. And he finishes off, so that this is a parenthetic comment over there, but it's relevant to us. Therefore, those who bake cakes, which are called schmaltz cakes, for the two breads for Shabbos, are conducting themselves appropriately because only a small amount of fat is mixed into it. Right? Now, he doesn't say explicitly that if you're having mezainis, you shouldn't say Lechem. You don't need to say Lechem Mishneh, but it appears that way. He's making it very clear that to fulfill the mitzvah of Lechem Mishneh, you need to have actual bread that the bracha is hamaitzi, not just mezainis. Okay. All right, you know what? Let's move on to this. And sort of not going in a very definitive order here, just saying. Yeah, we'll finish with this for today, and then we'll continue next time. Whenever you make a bracha on something, you have to hold it. Right? There's nothing to do with Shabbos. There's nothing to do with Lechem Mishneh. You always hold the thing that you're making the bracha on, ideally in your right hand. Right now, sometimes you see people making Lechem Mishneh and they just touch the bread. So, you don't touch the bread. You hold the bread. You have to hold the bread in your hands. And it's actually brought in the Paskim that you should make sure there's no interruption. Yeah. So, for example, if you want it to be ready to eat right away, the marshal, you should take. I'm pretty sure, if I recall correctly, it says you should take them out of the bag, even if you're only cutting one of the breads. But the second bread shouldn't be in a bag or a box or something. It should be both sort of right there ready. Now, it's brought in general with bread. It's brought in Shulchan Aruch that you should have that because there are 10 mitzvahs done in the preparation of preparing bread. So therefore, you should hold it with all 10 fingers. And therefore, the ikah is you hold the bread in your right hand. Again, not touching it, hold it in your right hand. The best way to do it is to hold it in both hands and to have all 10 fingers applied to the bread. What are the 10 mitzvahs? This is brought in Shulchan Aruch. Again, this is not in Hilchos Shabbos. This is in the laws of bracha of bread. This applies anytime you say Hametzi during the week as well. Let's see this. This is Lechem Simon Kuf Samach from the Untitled Chapter, chapter 167. Again, the laws of brachas. This again has nothing to do with Shabbos. The blessing of Hametzi should not be recited before one holds the bread in his hand, just as the blessing for the performance of mitzvahs is recited directly before the observance, either when the mitzvah is already at hand. Then he says, one must hold the bread in his right hand when reciting the blessing. For whenever one recites the blessing of an entity, should hold it in his right hand. It is preferable to place both hands on the bread, for the 10 fingers correspond to the 10 mitzvahs involved in the production of bread. A, 1, the prohibition of do not plow with an ox and a donkey. B, the prohibition against sowing mixed species. 3, the mitzvah to leave lechem to the poor people. That's the odd stalks that fall. D, the prohibition against taking shikha, which is if you forget to collect or to cut a few stalks. 5, the mitzvah to leave payed at the end of the field for the poor people. 6, the mitzvah of bringing the first fruits, which applies also to wheat and barley, to the Beis HaMikdash.
What does this have to do with?
1 second. G, the mitzvah of separating trumas. There's the first of the tithe, and the Ma'aser Rishon is another tithe, Ma'aser Sheni, it's another tithe, and also the mitzvah of separating the challah. So basically, there's 10 mitzvahs involved in the preparation of bread, and therefore you should hold the bread with 10 fingers. Oh. And by the way, he says, consequently, that's also why there are 10 words in the bracha of Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hametzi lechem min haaretz. It's 10 words. Also, he says the pasuk Matzmiach Chatzul Behema has 10 words, and also Einechel Lechesper, 10 words. Because there's lots of psukim that have 10 words that are connected with bread, because there's 10 mitzvahs done in the preparation of bread. So you're supposed to hold the challah in your right hand, and you're supposed to put on it 10 fingers. So you should hold it this way, because you want it to be held in your right hand, and in your left hand, you just want the 5 fingers to be holding it. Yes, and the chayra, instead of holding the challah, if you hold the challah, if you pick up the 2 breads like this,
and you have it on the second bread, not the one you're eating.
That doesn't matter. Yeah, you're being beitzeh on both of them, even though you're in fact only cutting one. You're beitzeh al shtei lechavim. You're breaking bread on 2 breads, right? So if you hold it like this, if you pick it up, I'm just thinking. Yeah, if you pick them up like this, and your right hand is up and your left hand is down, so then l'chayra you would say you're holding it with your left hand and only touching your 5 fingers. Here he says the lashon is that you should put on it both of your hands, but you have to hold it in your right hand. So I'm asking, I don't know for sure, I'm just looking at this right now, that l'chayra would be better to hold it this way with your right hand a little bit lower down, so that your right hand is actually holding it, and your left hand is right. No, but it could be either way. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
I'm going like this, right? So then if I like this, it's kind of just balancing.
Now, another thought which literally just popped into my head right now. One of the 10, he said the 10 mitzvahs. Yeah, so one of the 10 mitzvahs is bikurim, the first fruits. Now, bikurim only applies to the 7 species which Yisrael is praised with, out of which only 2 of them are grains, which is wheat and barley. So, what if you're having bread made with one of the other species, with spelt or rye.
Oh, that takes away some of it.
So it only takes one. The mitzvah bikurim. So then you can leave your pinky off. You could, like. Yeah, I don't know, but maybe it's actually a hakpod dafka to have a week. yeah. That's why the English. Yeah. All right, we'll pause here, and next time, like I said, next week there's no class. We'll continue in 2 weeks. Lechem Mishneh.
Yes, I always figured that when we're commemorating